One day, my chapter president of the National Speakers Association reached out to me and said, Cathy, I heard a rumor that you wrote one of your books in less than 6 weeks. And I said, well, yeah, I've actually written 4 of my 5 books at the time in less than 6 weeks. And he goes, oh my gosh, do you have a process? And I thought about it for a minute and I thought, yeah, I guess I do have a process. He said, we would love for you to do a chapter meeting on how to write your book quickly. Would you be interested in doing that? And I said, oh, I would love to do that. It forced me to codify what I do.
Hey everyone, Melanie Johnson here. I'm your host today. Oh my gosh, we have a great guest and I hope you're buckled up and ready to dive in. So if you've been thinking about writing a book, you're a business owner, entrepreneur, or you want to be a thought leader and leave a legacy and have no idea how to start, or if you should even do it and why you should do it, I have an expert here. I have known Cathy Fyock almost as long as I've been in the publishing business and worked with her on projects. She is excellent, outstanding. She helps people get from blank page to complete book. And I think she has like 10 books of her own. So she's got a lot of books. She's been an international bestseller. She's also been a Wall Street Journal bestselling author. Cathy, thank you for coming today.
It's my pleasure.
Tell us, how did you even get started in the editing and creating book business? Book coaching is really what you are. You're a book coach.
Book coach. Yeah. I tripped and fell into it, really. I had been an author. I was a consultant and a thought leader. I'd left the corporate world and wanted to establish my thought leadership as an HR professional. So I wrote several books in that space. And wow, nothing propels you into thought leadership like a book. So I've always been a fan of books. And I found that the more I wrote, the faster I got. And so one day, my chapter president of the National Speakers Association reached out to me and said, Cathy, I heard a rumor that you wrote one of your books in less than 6 weeks. And I said, well, yeah, I've actually written 4 of my 5 books at the time in less than 6 weeks. And he goes, oh my gosh, do you have a process? And I thought about it for a minute and I thought, yeah, I guess I do have a process. He said, we would love for you to do a chapter meeting on how to write your book quickly. Would you be interested in doing that? And I said, oh, I would love to do that. It forced me to codify what I do. And he said, well, before you say yes, we have a couple of our chapter members who are working on their books. Would you be willing to coach them using your process and then give the program? And I said, oh, that would be so cool because I know it works for me, but I don't know if it works for anybody else. So I coached these 2 women who were friends of mine. And pretty quickly, both of them said to me, have you ever thought about being a book coach? And at the time I said, no, is there such a thing? Is there a need? And they said, oh my gosh, yes. There's so many people who want to write a book, who need to write a book, but they don't know how to start, or they get stuck, or they can't get across the finish line. And that's how it all started. I gave my program for the chapter. And because I've been a member for so long, so many of my friends came up to me after the session and said, have you ever thought about becoming a book coach? I thought, okay, yeah, the universe is speaking. That was in the spring of 2013. And by January 2014, I launched my new business as a book coach.
Isn't that funny how things happen, that you would never have thought of? You didn't even know the job existed, never would have thought of you'd be in that business. And then you've been doing it for over a decade now.
I know, and I love it. And this is my most favorite role ever. I love what I do. I love working with smart people who have great ideas, but don't know how to take that great idea and turn it into a book. And that is so exciting for me.
Yeah, and you kind of seeded a couple ideas. So of course, we want to know into the 6-week process. We're going to want to know that.
Yes.
But tell us, why should somebody be writing a book? You do strictly nonfiction. And what do you see authors coming to you of their reasons they want a book? And when you run across somebody, why you tell them they should write a book?
I'll start with my own story, because when I got this idea about becoming a book coach, I thought, okay, I'm going to need to establish my credentials as a book coach. And I thought, oh, I'll write a book about how to write a book. Because I don't have an English degree. I don't have a love of writing. I mean, I have written books.
Mm.
I needed to write books, but I don't love writing. It's never been easy for me, but I thought this would be the perfect credential is to write the book about having a book, write about book coaching. And that
Mhm.
has established my credential as a book coach. That was really my credential in addition to being an author.
Yeah, and that makes so much sense. It does give you credibility in the marketplace. It does set you apart because suddenly now you've taken all that knowledge and put it in one place and
Yes.
put it somewhere where anybody can get it worldwide. You've now opened your market to a whole broader audience, I think, when you do it too, don't you think?
Absolutely. You become the person who literally wrote the book on that. And there
Yeah.
is something really magical about that. In fact, I tell all that writing a book is magical. And the things that will happen to you as a result of having written the book are magical. Doors will
Mhm.
open, you'll get speaking engagements, you'll be able to charge twice as much for speaking engagements. People will find you and come seeking your services. You'll have all kinds of newfound opportunities just because you've authored the book.
Yeah. So we're saying we encourage all of you to do this, not just because we're
Yes,
in the business, but we've just seen the result. Okay, let's dive into the 6-week process. You've got to share that with us.
yes. Let me just first start by saying that a few of my authors do it in 6 weeks, but most do not. Most are super busy professionals. They have
Mhm.
full time jobs. They're consultants, they're thought leaders, they're speakers, they're coaches. And so they have very busy schedules. We can definitely get it done in 6 months. But if you can spend more time, you can definitely get it done in 6 weeks. But it starts with clarity. You have to
Mhm.
know where you're going. You have to
Mhm.
see how the book interfaces with your business and how you want it to drive business in order for
Mhm.
it to do that for you. Because writing just any book will not open doors. It's writing the book that is about your thought leadership, that does
Mhm.
contain your key ideas that are different from others and that will help separate you from the crowd.
Yeah. I agree with that because you have to have a full plan. As we know, it's not just about the book. Do you encourage your offers to see a full circle, 360 of not just the book, but how the book works for them?
Yeah. So we start with a strategy session. And in the strategy session, we definitely nail down some of these key elements, like the purpose of the book and how it's going to drive business. So we look at that as
Mhm.
a key hit issue. We look at the thesis statement and how it intersects with your thought leadership
Mhm.
currently and projecting into the future. I also want it to
Mhm.
be an aspirational, where you want your business to go, what you want to be doing. We talk
Mhm.
about the targeted reader because not everybody's going to love your book. There is a certain audience. And if you have a business already, it should align with that business so that you're driving that. And then the content outline, which puts the content into manageable chunks that will be easier for your reader, but it will also be easier for you to write it once you have determined what those chunks are for the outline of the book.
Yeah, and I get about 6 weeks to 6 months because I tell authors that life gets in the way, and we
It does.
understand that.
It does.
Something
It
happens,
always
someone gets
does.
sick,
Mm.
or they have a trip that they have to take or a business opportunity, and I've had a few that have really had their nose to the grindstone, like you say, and they get it done during that time. And, we talk about repurposing content, and you wrote a book about blog to book. Talk
Yes.
about how people can repurpose content to make that shorter window or make it easier.
Yes. I've found that blog content can easily be repurposed into book content strategically. I was
Yeah.
attending a conference and within the conference, like 4 people came up to me and said, "Kathy, I have all this content from a blog. I've been doing this for years. Surely there's a book in there." And I said, "Yes, surely there is." So we worked together and I started realizing that I could offer a blog to book package. But then I suddenly realized I have a blog to book inside me because I've been blogging along the way. and
Mhm.
I could create my own book. So what I found was start with an outline, and we start with the questions that you want to answer in your book. So
Mhm.
started with 52 questions. I had answered more than half of those already with different blog posts. So I mapped the questions to the content that I had already written. And by the time I got it all put into one doc, it was, I don't know, like 85% complete. And
Wow.
then I just had to write the additional pieces. So that book, a blog to book, I wrote in, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks because the content was already there. And so if
Mhm.
you're really smart, and there's so much content that you can repurpose, it can be blog posts, articles, white papers, handout
Videos even.
materials, it's transcripts, you name it, and any content that you have created can be repurposed. Matter of being smart about that and not reinventing the wheel when you don't have to.
So true. All right, we have to talk about the big thing, AI. It was just announced, I think, yesterday that anything created with AI is no longer to be copyrighted. And are you using AI at all? What are you telling your authors about AI? What's your opinion on all that?
I think AI is a fabulous tool, but I think it has to be used as a tool and not as a substitute for what the author can
Mhm.
do. When I have written different pieces of content, I start with my own content. So
Mhm.
recently, I put together an ebook, and it's called Word by Word: The Transformative Power of Authorship. And
Yes.
because I wanted to experiment with using AI in a much more aggressive way. So I wrote a blog post about the transformative power of authorship. And I had lots of quotes from my authors and fed the blog post into ChatGPT. And then I said, "Is there a book here?" And of course it said, "Yes, there's a fabulous book here. And here's the outline for that book." And then I said, "Okay, let's put together the chapters." And it put together a really great sort of outline for the book based
Mm.
on my content. And then
Mhm.
what I did, I needed to go back and enter the stories because I had lots of stories that my authors had shared with me
Right.
over the years about how writing a book had changed their life. So
Mhm.
I incorporated those stories, went back and inserted the stories manually. I first asked
Mhm.
AI, though, if there was a smarter way for me to do it. And they said at this point, it was just probably better for me to insert my own stories. And so I did that. I had AI polish it up and
Mhm.
still use, and I use it enough that it knows my voice now and what I like. And then I had to clean it up again. I sent it
Yep.
to 2 people that I really trust. These 2 people are, one loves AI and one hates AI, and and they both know my voice. So I wanted them to read it very cynically and look
Mhm.
for any traces of AI. So I removed those and
Mhm.
substituted my own voice where I was getting a little AI like, and it came out with a product that I now offer as a free resource.
And I love it. It does shorten the time, and I get the stories. We did our recent book Be Recognized mostly with AI, but we inputted repurposing our content, like you said. But AI just doesn't know your stories. They're not in your head unless you've inputted them in there, and they may not know where you want those stories, and those are unique to you. They might be able to make up stories because AI is good about making up. And I will say, I'm going to recommend we use Claude more than we did ChatGPT because we felt like it
Yes.
was a better language model. But then we kind of went back and forth and made a custom GPT with our voice on it. Like the more you content you give it, it starts to know your style, like you said,
Yeah,
when you're
does.
doing it. Yeah. And then talk about how do you use your book for becoming a speaker?
So many keynote presentations now are reserved for authors. Number of speakers come and tell me that the reason they are writing a book, number one reason, is because they want those keynote spots. Woman in
Mhm.
particular told me she lost a $10,000 speaking opportunity because she did not have the book. It can literally cost you tens of thousands of dollars by not having the book that drives the keynote.
Mhm.
because if you're brought in to be the big keynoter, they want to know that you're the author. And many times they want to package and sell your book to the conference attendees as well. So you're missing out on lots of opportunities if you
Yeah.
don't have the book.
I agree. And I tell authors that. I mean, we've had authors that were started, that was the first thing they decided they wanted to speak, and they had no speaking experience and then launched their book. And then they were getting on stages. And then they
Yep.
launched a second book. And now they get like $10,000, $15,000 a speech, which is
Yes.
awesome. Yeah. What do you tell about the authors? As we were talking about earlier, life gets in the way and we have to be patient with people that are going through our process. But so many people, they're starting on their own without a coach and then they just don't finish. I mean, I talked to somebody yesterday. They're like, they had 3 chapters written for 5 years now.
Yeah.
I heard similar stories.
Yes, I've heard so many of those. People come to me and they say, okay, this has been on my wish list or but a to-do list for 5 years, 10 years. Yeah, you need momentum. When you're writing a book,
Mhm.
momentum is really important because what happens is, especially if you're a lifelong learner, and so many of my clients are lifelong learners, you're always learning new things. And if you delay writing the book, you're going to delay what your book is about and you're going to want to change it and modify it and so forth. So try to do it within a 6-month period. I've found that if you can target that, it's really
Mhm.
very doable. I think you need about 5 hours a week of writing time to get it
Yeah.
done in a 6-month process.
And you know what? I love working with an author while they're doing the process, like, at least if they're
Yeah.
getting partway through, because, when we make the book cover for them, it gives them excitement and momentum like you talked about. Then it becomes visual, and then they're, like, even more ready to go, like, "Oh, this is a reality, and I committed to the publisher, and I've committed to the book coach, so now I know even if they don't have a book coach, now I need to hit the gas pedal and get it going." And, I love what you said too, like missed opportunities. Hey, if you don't have a book, how many opportunities are you going to miss next year?
That's right. And sometimes I've had authors that get the speaking engagement because they have the title of the book. They haven't finished the book, but they have the
Yeah.
title and they have sold the keynote. So now they have to write the book. And sometimes
Yeah.
that's a great thing because your book then becomes important and urgent. The problem with
Mhm.
a lot of books is that they're always important, but they're sometimes not urgent. And so to
Right.
create an artificial timeline around a speaking engagement or some event that's coming up, or just working
Yeah.
with a book coach where you know it's a package. If you're working with me, then there is a sense of urgency of let's
Yeah.
get it done.
Yeah. It's like you're the accountability person as well as the coach along the way. And I know it's like, well, I don't want to disappoint Kathy. I got to have my
Right.
homework done.
That's right. Sometimes they'll do their work right the day before we meet
Yes.
because they don't want to be a disappointment or say, oh, I didn't do anything this week. So it really works.
Yeah. So if you have one last piece of advice you can give someone who's thinking about writing a book, what would you tell them?
And if you're thinking that you might need an accountability partner or a coach, reach out. Hey, let's have a conversation. I love to talk with folks who are considering authorship and help them see if it's right for them.
Perfect. Tell people where they can find you, Kathy.
You can go to my website at cathyfyock.com, or you can always reach me at cathy@cathyfyock.com.
Great. So everybody keep writing or start writing, and have a great week. And if you're looking to get your book published and become an international best-selling author, reach out to us at eliteonlinepublishing.com. Not only do we publish your book, but we know how to market your book for your business. We'll see you next time, everybody. Have a great week. Hey, are you looking to increase your revenue, build credibility, and elevate your brand? This podcast is brought to you by Elite Online Publishing, an innovative publishing and full spectrum marketing company. They will publish and market your book to make it a #1 bestseller. Becoming an author is the best way to market your business. So contact them at eliteonlinepublishing.com today. All of their authors become #1 bestsellers.